bell above the cafe door gave its usual soft chime as August stepped inside, tucking away her phone and brushing a leaf from her coat. Outside, the late October wind swept through the stone walkways of Braxton University, sending students scurrying between classes. But inside the tiny off-campus coffee shop, time seemed to still. It was warm here, familiar. The kind of place where mismatched chairs and old jazz records whispered comfort between espresso shots and autumn decor. And at the far table, near the bookshelf lined with battered paperbacks and fading alumni magazines, he was waiting. Professor Daniel Merrick. She spotted him before he noticed her. Elbow deep in student essays, sleeves rolled to the forearms, wire-rimmed glasses perched low on his nose, a quiet figure at the edge of chaos. He looked up. Their eyes met, like clockwork. "August," he said, voice even and smooth. "Right on time." "Because I schedule everything," she replied with a half smile. "Engineering major. It's in my DNA." He gave a soft chuckle. "Still surviving my literature course, I see." "Barely," she teased. "I signed up for a gen ed credit, not an existential crisis." "You chose literature of longing and loss. What did you expect?" "A nap." That earned a rare grin from him, brief but real. She shrugged off her coat and took the seat across from him. Around them, other students chatted. The espresso machine hissed, and the hum of campus life buzzed like a backdrop. But this table, this hour between them every Wednesday, was quietly becoming her favorite part of the week. He handed her a marked-up draft. "This essay, it's different from your last. There's more in it, not just structure. You're starting to write through something." August stared at the notes in red ink. He wasn't wrong. Somewhere between analyzing Wuthering Heights and comparing it to grief patterns in structural load-bearing systems, because that's how her brain worked, she'd written something personal. "I didn't mean to," she said quietly. "You did," he replied, "and it's the most honest thing on this page." She looked up. His expression was unreadable, thoughtful, reserved, as it always was in class, in office hours, even here. But something lingered behind his words, a pause between sentences, a soft ache in the air. This was a university romance in the making, though neither of them had spoken it aloud. She was 23, a senior, brilliant with circuits, but clumsy with emotion. He was 30, thoughtful, composed, and impossibly off-limits. He was her professor. She was still his student. And whatever this was between them, this almost, it couldn't cross that line. At least, not yet. Braxton University's annual Fall Symposium was one of those events that everyone claimed to dread, but secretly enjoyed. It was held in the old library's rotunda, the kind of space with vaulted ceilings, stained glass windows, and the constant smell of polished wood and ambition. The night buzzed with professors, guest lecturers, and upper-level students in stiff blazers and borrowed heels, mingling over cheese cubes and lukewarm Chardonnay. August stood near the refreshment table, shifting uncomfortably in her boots. Her department chair had strongly encouraged senior students to attend, and technically, this counted as a networking opportunity. But so far, the only thing she'd collected was a headache and a paper napkin with someone's spilled coffee on it. Then she saw him. Across the room, near a display of rare books and softly lit university artifacts, stood Professor Merrick. He wasn't in his usual tweed. Tonight, he wore a black button-down shirt, sleeves neat, hair combed with more intention than usual. He looked different. Not casual, not formal, just quietly striking. He spotted her almost instantly. And suddenly, she wasn't just an engineering major forced to endure a literature-heavy reception. She was seen. "Didn't expect to see you here," he said, joining her at the table with a drink in hand. "I was lured by the promise of free wine," she said, trying to sound light. He smiled, eyes flicking over her expression, the way he always did when she tried to hide her discomfort behind sarcasm. "This isn't your scene," he said, not a question. "No," she admitted. "But apparently networking is part of being a well-rounded academic. I'd say you're already more rounded than most. You just have sharper corners." She looked up, caught off guard. "Is that supposed to be a compliment?" "It's exactly a compliment." The space between them seemed to narrow, even though they weren't touching. Around them, professors chatted, alumni laughed too loudly, and someone began setting up a mic for a reading at the front of the room. But for a moment, it was quiet. Just the two of them again. A pattern she was starting to feel in her bones. "I read your revision," he said, lowering his voice slightly. "The one you emailed this morning. Too much?" He shook his head. "Too honest." Her breath caught. He didn't mean the writing. He was talking about her, or maybe something they both refused to name. But then, just as the moment swelled, a familiar voice cut through it. "Professor Merrick." Another faculty member, older, jovial, came up and clapped him on the back. "Come say a few words before the reading starts." Daniel hesitated, eyes still on August. "Excuse me," he said gently, and turned away. She watched him walk across the room, her heart unsteady. This was a university event. Formal, public. There were rules here, and yet she'd never felt more drawn to breaking them. The fall symposium had ended with the usual polite applause, a lukewarm reading, and a slow migration toward the exits. August had lingered near the back wall until the crowd thinned, clutching her coat in one hand, her phone in the other. She wasn't sure why she waited. Maybe she was hoping to catch one last glance of him. Maybe she wasn't ready to go home yet. Or maybe she didn't want the night to end in silence, not after the way his eyes had lingered on hers during that conversation. She was outside on the library steps, pulling on her scarf, when she heard his voice behind her. Walking back alone? She turned. Daniel stood a few steps behind, his coat open over that black shirt, his hands shoved in his pockets. He looked less like a professor now, more like someone she could imagine seeing at a bookstore or leaning over a second cup of coffee on a Sunday morning. "Looks like it," she said, trying to hide the flutter in her chest. "You headed home too?" "I am," he said, then nodded toward the cobblestone path leading through the quad. "Mind if I walk with you?" She shook her head. "Not at all." They fell into step together, the sound of their boots echoing softly on the stone. Leaves rustled in the trees above, and the campus had quieted. Most of the students already tucked away in dorms or apartments, windows glowing faintly behind thick curtains. "I'm surprised you stayed so late," he said. "You looked like you were one literary reading away from bolting." "I was," she admitted, laughing under her breath. "But then, you came over." His silence said everything. They reached the main quad. a wide stretch of grass surrounded by ivy-covered buildings, and old lampposts casting a honey glow over the walkways. "This doesn't feel like school anymore," August said quietly. He glanced at her. "No? It feels different. I don't know." She hesitated. "Like we're not in that classroom. Like I'm not just your student." He stopped walking. So did she. The moment stretched between them, taut and fragile. The wind moved the leaves at their feet, and a light flickered in the window of the humanities building across the lawn. "You're not just my student," he said finally, voice low. August's breath caught. "Then what am I?" He looked at her, really looked at her, as if he'd been trying not to all night. His voice was calm but firm, every word chosen with care. "You're someone I think about more than I should." Her heart thudded once, then again, louder. She didn't speak, couldn't. "But this is a line I haven't crossed," he added, "because I respect you, and because the moment I do, everything changes. And if I cross it first..." He blinked. Then, gently but undeniably, he took a step closer. "You'd still be my student, August," he said, "for a few more weeks. And I would still have to find a way to stay on this side of that line." "But it wouldn't be easy, would it?" she asked, almost a whisper. "No," he admitted, "it wouldn't." They stood like that, just inches apart, the lamplight flickering around them. No kiss, no touch, just words, just restraint, just the heat of something waiting. She smiled softly. "Then I guess we're both going to have to survive a little longer." He exhaled, slow, almost a laugh. "I hope we do." And they kept walking, quiet again, but not the same. Nothing would be the same now. It was supposed to be a normal Thursday. Cold, gray, uneventful. August was halfway through her third cup of coffee and reviewing her notes before class in the engineering building when her friend Lex slid into the seat beside her and leaned in with a smirk. "So," Lex began, drawing out the word, "you and Professor Merrick?" August froze mid-sip. "What about us?" Lex gave her a look, one of those teasing but dead serious looks that said I saw something. "I was at the fall symposium," Lex said. "You two were talking and walking, alone." August tried to shrug, casually. "He's my professor. We were just talking." Lex said, not buying it. "Sure, just like you just happened to sit at his table every Wednesday at that off-campus cafe." "August, you're literally the only engineering major who writes like she's in love with her metaphors." August blinked. "You've read my essays?" "No, but rumor is he reads them out loud in his office hours. And he only does that with work he's obsessed with." That made her stomach twist, not with embarrassment, but with something close to panic. Because it wasn't just Lex. If others had noticed. Before she could respond, Lex's tone softened. "I'm not judging. I'm just saying, be careful. People talk. And some faculty. They'd love an excuse to bring Merrick down a peg." August's pulse raced. That night in the quad flashed through her mind. The words, the distance that had nearly disappeared between them. It had felt safe, private. But maybe it wasn't. Maybe it never had been. Later, in class, Merrick acted as though nothing had changed. But she could feel the shift in his pauses, in the way he avoided looking directly at her, in the way he said her name like it was laced with warning. And when she passed him her assignment at the end of the lecture, he held her gaze for just a second too long. Not longing, but worry. Something had cracked, and now weren't just fighting what they felt. They were trying to outrun what others thought they saw. Him. He still came to class, on time, composed, every tie and word in place. But something was different. Sharper, colder, not unkind, but distant. He stopped giving her extra comments on her essays. He stopped looking at her when he lectured. He stopped staying after class. And worst of all, he stopped showing up at the coffee shop. She told herself it was fine, that she was imagining it, that maybe he was just busy or distracted or giving her the space she didn't ask for. But the truth settled in her gut like wet cement. He was pulling away. She saw it in the way he interacted with the class. Overly formal now, overly careful. As if their moment in the quad had been a mistake he couldn't afford to repeat. She didn't know if someone had said something, or if it was just fear finally catching up to him. But he was hiding. From her. From what they both knew was real. By the time her weekly paper was returned with nothing more than a check mark at the top, she couldn't take it anymore. After class, she waited until the last student left, then walked straight to the front. He was organizing his notes, carefully ignoring the fact that she hadn't moved from her seat. "Professor Merrick," she said, voice steady. "Do you have a minute?" He looked up, then down again, closing his folder. "I'm actually running late for a department meeting." "Then I'll walk with you," she replied. He paused, that old, unreadable look in his eyes. Then he nodded once, almost imperceptibly. They stepped out into the cold air together, the silence between them full of everything unsaid. "I noticed," she said quietly, "that you stopped meeting me, that you've been pulling back." "I thought that's what you'd want," he replied, not looking at her. "No, Daniel, it's what you want, or what you think you should want." He exhaled sharply. "August, no. You don't get to say my name like that if you're going to pretend nothing happened. Nothing is happening." He stopped walking. They stood near the edge of the quad, the breeze tugging at her scarf, leaves skittering past their feet like whispers. "This isn't just about us," he said. "I have a job, a reputation. You have your degree to finish. Do you know how quickly a story spreads on campus? Do you know what it would do to both of us if anyone reported?" "Someone already noticed," she said. "Lex. And if she noticed, others might too. But I don't care about rumors. I care about you pretending like none of it matters." He closed his eyes for a moment. "I care about you," he said, "which is why I'm trying to do the right thing." August's voice broke. "But what if this, us, is the right thing?" Daniel looked at her, and for the first time in 2 weeks, his guard cracked, but only for a second. Then he shook his head. "Not yet." And he walked away. Daniel stared at the stack of essays in front of him, all of them beginning to blur into the same structureless paragraphs and tired metaphors. The fluorescent light in his office hummed overhead, and the clock on the wall ticked louder than usual. He hadn't read August's paper yet. It was at the bottom of the stack, her name circled in his mind like a word he wasn't supposed to say aloud. He leaned back in his chair, took off his glasses, and pinched the bridge of his nose. This was getting harder. When he'd first met her, she'd been another name on a roster. A senior engineering major with tired eyes and a dismissive attitude toward fiction. But then she'd written that first paper, and the second. And then there was that tutoring session in the cafe. The small confessions. The way she always looked like she was holding something back. He'd started to see her. And worse, he'd let her see him. It was a mistake. He knew that. He reminded himself of it daily. Before class, after lectures, in the stillness of his apartment at night. But then there was the symposium. That walk in the quad. Her voice in the dark asking, "And if I cross the line first?" And God, how he'd wanted her to. The distance he put between them since then had been deliberate, a line of defense built from policy and self-preservation. But it was also the loneliest thing he'd ever done. And it wasn't working. He thought pulling away would protect her. But now he couldn't focus. Not in class, not in meetings, not in these godforsaken papers. He kept thinking of her. How she'd said his name like it meant something. How she didn't flinch when she challenged him. How she didn't hesitate when she said, "What if this is the right thing?" And now, here he was, staring at her paper again, afraid of what it might say. When he finally opened it, his breath caught. It wasn't about the book, not really. It was about vulnerability, about risk, about walking a tightrope, even when the fall is inevitable, because the view from the edge might be worth it. At the bottom, she had written one line. "How long are we supposed to pretend this isn't real?" He set the paper down and closed his eyes. She wasn't letting him go quietly. And deep down, he wasn't sure he wanted her to. It was raining the following Friday. A steady, cold drizzle that turned the Braxton campus into a watercolor of gray stone and gold leaves. August had forgotten her umbrella, which felt oddly poetic considering the mood she'd been carrying all week. She wasn't even sure why she'd come to class today. She hadn't been able to concentrate, hadn't been sleeping well. She'd been drifting through lectures, through conversations, through versions of herself she didn't quite recognize anymore. She wasn't in love, not exactly, but she was on the edge of something that felt dangerously close. After class ended, she was the last one packing up her things. Again. She didn't expect him to speak to her. Not anymore. But then, "August," he said softly. She looked up. Professor Merrick stood at the front of the room, hands resting on the podium, like it was the only thing keeping him steady. The last student had already left. The door clicked shut behind them. She didn't move. "I read your paper," he said, voice rougher than usual. "The last line, it undid me." She swallowed. It was just a line. "No," he said, walking closer now, slow, careful. "It wasn't. It was every word I haven't said since the night in the quad." She sat frozen as he reached her row, stopping just short of crossing the distance between them. But this time, he didn't retreat. "I thought staying away would protect us, that if I was cold enough, you'd move on, that I could go back to pretending I don't." He broke off, shaking his head. She stood. "Don't what?" she asked, voice barely a whisper. He looked at her then. Really looked. All the restraint was gone. "Don't think about you at 3 a.m. when the world is quiet," he said. "Don't memorize your laugh like it's part of a poem I shouldn't have read. Don't wish you weren't my student, so I could tell you what I've been wanting to say since the second week of class." August blinked, stunned. He stepped closer. Just one step, enough to make her heart race. "I want you," he said, "but I want you honestly, not in stolen moments, not while it still feels like something wrong. And when it doesn't, she asked, breath shaky. His voice softened. Then I'll say it again. Every damn day, if you'll let me. A silence settled between them. No desks, no lectures. Just two people trying to figure out how to exist in the same truth. Her fingers curled around the strap of her bag, grounding herself. When does that start? She asked quietly. He smiled, sad, restrained, hopeful. Soon, he whispered. Graduation's 8 weeks away. Then, in the smallest, most rebellious act of tenderness, he reached out and touched her hand. Just briefly, just enough. August didn't mean to eavesdrop. She had stopped by the literature department office to pick up a copy of the campus literary journal. Professor Merrick had mentioned one of his colleagues published a short story she might like. But as she turned the corner toward his office, she heard voices. His door was slightly ajar. Her name wasn't mentioned, but she heard enough to know it was about him and something else, something big. It's a huge opportunity, Daniel, said a woman's voice, one of the senior faculty members. The program at Hawthorne is expanding. They want someone with your background, your publishing history, and they're offering tenure. Hawthorne, a university in Vermont. 4 hours away, prestigious, private, not Braxton. There was a pause, then Daniel's voice, low, conflicted. It's not the right time. You've said that for years, she replied. Don't let something temporary keep you from moving forward. Something temporary. August's chest tightened. She stepped away quickly, footsteps soft on the carpet, heart thudding like a drum. She didn't need to hear the rest. Later that night, she sat in her apartment, her essay untouched on the screen, rereading her messages to Daniel from earlier that week. Quiet, careful check-ins. He hadn't mentioned any job offer, hadn't told her he was thinking of leaving. But maybe he wasn't going to. Maybe he was going to leave her. It made sense, didn't it? He'd been fighting his feelings since the start. He'd said everything would be easier if they could be honest. But maybe the truth was simpler than either of them wanted to admit. He was meant for more, and she might just be something he couldn't take with him. It was raining again, harder this time. Sheets of cold, spring rain hammered the sidewalks and blurred the streetlights outside August's apartment. The storm rolled in without warning, but it matched her mood perfectly. Raw, loud, and impossible to ignore. She didn't expect the knock on her door. She definitely didn't expect it to be him. When she opened it, Daniel Merrick stood there, drenched, his dark coat soaked through, hair slicked to his forehead, eyes full of something desperate. She stared at him, breath caught in her throat. You knew, he said, voice rough, about the job offer. She didn't respond. Not yet. You weren't supposed to hear that, he said. I didn't want to tell you until I had made a decision. Her jaw tightened. So you were going to just leave? No. He stepped closer, rain dripping from his collar. I was trying to figure out if I could leave you. That broke something open. Don't do that, she said, voice shaking. Don't come here soaking wet with some tortured look like I'm your reason to stay. You are my reason to stay. You didn't even tell me. I didn't know how, he admitted. Everything about you makes me reckless, August. I can't think clearly when I'm around you. I can't sleep when I'm not. And it terrifies me. She swallowed hard, her hands curled tightly at her sides. I thought I could wait, he whispered. I thought if I held back long enough, it would get easier. And has it? She asked, staring into him. No, he said, stepping into the doorway, voice barely controlled. It's torture. Then silence. The kind that says, do something. And she did. She grabbed his shirt, pulled him inside, and kissed him. It was not soft. It was everything that had been bottled up for months. The restraint, the stolen glances, the desperate longing. His hands found her waist, her back, her face, like he'd been waiting for permission to feel. Clothes clung to him, rain dripping to her floor, but neither of them cared. He broke the kiss, only to breathe her name. August. She silenced him with another. They didn't make it to the bedroom. The storm outside only grew louder, but inside, it was quiet. Just their breathing, their warmth, their hands learning each other like a language they'd both been fluent in before they ever spoke it aloud. When they lay tangled together afterward, heartbeats still catching up, he rested his forehead against hers. I'm not leaving, he whispered. You don't have to say that. I'm not saying it for you, he said. I'm saying it for me. Sunlight spilled softly through August's curtains, warming the hardwood floor where his coat still lay in a damp heap. She woke slowly, blinking against the pale morning light, and turned to find Daniel already awake beside her, silent, watching her like he didn't want to look away. I thought you'd disappear before sunrise, she murmured, voice still heavy with sleep. He smiled. I considered it, but I couldn't. She leaned into him, tucked her head beneath his chin, and let her fingers trace lazy lines over his face. It felt surreal, like they had stepped outside of time, and nothing could reach them here. Do you regret it? She asked softly. No, he said instantly. Not a single second. She smiled. Good, because I don't either. They stayed like that for a long time. No titles, no roles, just them. Later, while he made coffee in her tiny kitchen and she stood barefoot in his button-down, they talked about everything. Her capstone project, his unpublished manuscript, what it might be like when she graduated in a few weeks, and the rules between them no longer applied. It felt like the beginning of something real, finally possible. Until her phone buzzed. She picked it up absent-mindedly, expecting a text from Lex or a morning reminder. But her breath caught when she read the email subject line. Student Professor Conduct Review, scheduled meeting notification. She froze. Daniel noticed instantly. What is it? She turned the screen toward him. His face changed. Someone reported us. The room went still. Coffee cooled. The sunlight suddenly felt too bright. And just like that, everything they'd been protecting, everything they'd finally allowed themselves to feel, was no longer theirs alone.